Hi guys, welcome back to the Doctor's Discoveries episode 9, and today we're going to be talking about the Radium Girls. I'm Serena.
I'm Ellen.
I'm Sharvi.
And I'm Shanti. So today we're going to be talking about Radium Girls, which was the term used for female factory workers who were exposed to radioactive material in the 1900s and to 1920s.
So back in the 1900s, society was really obsessed with radium. So radium was discovered in 1898 by Marie and Pierre Curie, and it was seen as magical, and it glowed, and it generated heat, and it emitted really mysterious rays. So people, just because it emitted energy, they thought it increased vitality. So early medicine misunderstood radioactivity for medicine. And then doctors described it for things like arthritis or low energy or mental health and just general weakness, and it slowly became a luxury ingredient that was used to sell products. So some very specific real radium products are the Radithor, which is a radioactive energy drink, and there's Thoradia Cosmetics, which had a lot of radium in it. And then there was even toothpaste with radium and radium heating pads and even butter, chocolate, and ointments. And in the public perception, it was marketed like a miracle vitamin, and people really thought that radium was healthy.
Yeah, so more specifically, digging into the Radium Girls again, in World War I, factories were established to produce watches and military dials for World War I, and they were painted with material that included radium. Radium is basically glow-in-the-dark radioactive elements, and hundreds of young women were hired for these paint jobs as their small hands were well suited for the very detailed work. Hundreds of young women were hired for these paint jobs as their small hands were well suited for the very detailed work. And these factory workers contracted radiation poisoning from painting radium dials. There were 3 factories in the U.S. where these incidents occurred, such as Orange, New Jersey, at around 1917, Ottawa, Illinois, at around early 1920s, and Waterbury, Connecticut, around 1920s as well. The women in every facility ingested big amounts of radium to a point where it was deadly. And a big reason from this was that they were instructed to brush their brushes on their lips to give them a sharp tip for detailing. Their managers who instructed them to do this assured the girls there was nothing to worry about. These women were known as the Ghost Girls, as the radium dust in the paint made their hair, skin, and even clothing glow due to the self-luminous elements in the paint. Some even painted the paint onto their teeth to make them glow. Radium is very dangerous, and a researcher named Marie Curie even suffered radiation burns while handling it, dying eventually due to radiation exposure. Eventually, the Radium Girls became deathly ill and had symptoms of toothache that developed into bleeding and full of pus ulcers. The disease even spread to their mouths and lower jaws, which many had to be removed, and to other parts of the body. Serena, do you want to talk more about the chemistry of radium?
Yeah, sure. I also wanted to just add that, the girls, when they, confronted their managers about this, their managers, told them, it's all fine. And then when the press started hearing about this, the companies would tell them, this is not because of the radium. Anyways, radium is a chemical element and is one of the alkaline earth metals. And in the luminous paint that the workers used, radium was mixed with a phosphor, often zinc sulfide, I think, and it's the binder to create that glow-in-the-dark paint. And radium's radiation would excite the phosphor, causing it to glow. And this made radium seem really magical. And what made radium so deadly was the fact that it was radioactive, and radium atoms decay and emit ionizing radiation such as alpha particles, beta particles, and gamma rays. And that radiation interacts with the biological tissue, breaking chemical bonds, damaging cells, and ultimately destroying bones and the soft tissue from the inside. But because the paint was radioactive, every time a brush was handled, after being, as Ellen said, pointed with the lips, the workers would ingest that radium, and then once it was inside the body, the radium behaves chemically kind of like calcium, because they're both alkaline earth metals and they have 2 valence electrons, which leads the body to incorporate it into the bones, and then it just sits there and emits radium. And damages the bone marrow and bone structure over time. And this is the root cause of the bone necrosis, fractures, cancers, and the quote-unquote radium jaw that many of the women suffered. Shanti, do you want to add on to that?
Okay, so adding on to what Serena said before, the reason why radium is actually so dangerous is because it's radioactive, which means that when it enters the body, since it's a very heavy atom and it has a really large number of neutrons and protons, that means that it's radioactive and it's unstable. So naturally it would try to lose a certain amount of neutrons and protons, and the way it does this is by emitting alpha particles, which is a particle that just has 2 neutrons and 2 protons. And why these particles are so dangerous once they get into your body is because they have a very positive charge. So they rip electrons away from atoms and molecules as they travel throughout your body, which is called ionization. And ionization is basically just the process in which alpha particles strip electrons from atoms. And this is really dangerous because it's basically destroying the atoms and molecules in your body, and obviously that depletes the function of organs or tissue. And alpha particles can even directly break the chemical bonds in DNA, which is literally what defines a person. And you might think that all atoms give most atoms give off alpha particles everywhere around you, right? But the thing is, those alpha particles are outside of your skin, and because of their size, mass, and low penetration power, they can't enter your skin and don't really pose a threat until it's coming from inside your body. So when the Radium Girls ingested the radium through the paint brushes, that was when it became super dangerous for them, and it started destroying their bodies and they didn't even know.
I also wanted to bring up the first major case of how they started seeing the effects of radium. So there was this girl named Molly Maggia, and there was pain in her tooth. So the dentist pulled it out, but the hole didn't heal. And then slowly, Serena and Shanti brought up, the entire jawbone became infected. And then once the doctor tried to remove the dead bone, but it literally disintegrated in his hand. So radium had eaten her jaw from the inside. And then, like Serena said, the company didn't want their workers to know this, so the company doctors wrote syphilis on her death certificate to discredit her, and this lie was really crucial for the company's PR. So it was really hard for the girls to sue because they were poor teenage girls, and the company was really wealthy and connected. And then many lawyers also refused because the women were dying. And then also radium poisoning was fairly new, and the company denied everything. So there was one girl named Grace Fryer, and she was really determined to find a lawyer. It took her 2 years. But by 1927, her spine had been so damaged by radium that she wore a metal back brace and she could barely walk. So she filed a case with 4 other women, and they were so sick that the judge had to hold hearings at their houses or in the hospital, and they became national news, called the Living Dead Woman. So each woman received, I believe, around $10,000, and all their medical fees were covered.
I just want to add on to that by saying that a test in 1925 by Harrison Martland totally turned it around when he demonstrated that radium was poisoning the workers from the inside, and then that legal case kind of gave that scientific weight, and then it forced the public and courts confront this company, and then that's when the women started getting the justice that they deserved. So I think that wraps up this episode about the Radium Girls. I'm Serena.
I'm Sharvi.
I'm Ellen.
And I'm Shanti. Just a quick disclaimer, everything that was in this podcast was researched and produced by high schoolers, so might not be completely true. Thank you for listening.
Bye.